Governor, I see that you've joined us. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up and we'll get started. Governor, I can see that you've joined us. If you're ready to get started, give me a thumbs up and I'll kick this off.
I'm as ready as I'll ever be, I guess.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining this town hall Zoom meeting. We also want to welcome those of you who are joining on Facebook. I'm Derek Miller. I'm the president of the Salt Lake Chamber, as well as serving as the chair of the Utah Economic Response Task Force. On today's town hall, we will be joined by Governor Gary Herbert. We've also got Senator Mitt Romney, Chris Cox, who's the executive director of the Utah Governor's Office of Management and Budget, Angie Osguthorpe, who is president and CEO of the Davis Chamber of Commerce, and she's brought with her one of her great businesses, Troy Wood, who's the CEO of LakeView Hospital. Before I turn the time over to Governor Herbert, I want to mention something about the Utah Leads Together plan. All of you hopefully know that one of the objectives of the Economic Task Force was to put together an economic response plan, which we call Utah Leads Together. The Utah Leads Together plan identifies federal stimulus as one of the most important ways that Utah citizens, employers, and the overall economy can get through the urgent phase that we are currently in. On our Monday morning meeting of the task force, we asked ourselves, as we do at each meeting, what is the most important thing that we need to focus on right now? And the resounding answer to that question was what you will hear from Governor Herbert to help every qualified Utah business apply for a paycheck protection loan. The task force also recognizes the need to support the very small businesses through this process. Under normal circumstances, small businesses work every day to keep their head above water. And we, of course, know that we are far from normal circumstances. And so that need to provide technical assistance to these very small businesses is greater than ever. To provide that support, I want to let you know that the task force is working on three fronts. Number one, we are working with the Eccles Business School at the University of Utah on an online seminar series that they are producing titled How to Save Your Business. We know that Senator Romney has participated in that, and it's hosted by former Governor Mike Leavitt. It is focused on very specific and very practical information for you as an employer. Number two, the task force has developed a list of federal programs as well as frequently asked questions, and you can find that, as you can all of the business resources, at coronavirus.utah.gov/business. Number three, we want to make sure that you know that we have set up a rapid response team that will help Utah businesses by answering your questions and helping you to troubleshoot problems as you access the federal stimulus funds that are available. In fact, the team was set up just late last week, was working over the weekend, and just in those few days have helped more than 600 Utah very small businesses. The team is made up of 50 volunteers from over 20 Utah organizations. Governor, today in your press conference, you talked about how businesses can access these federal stimulus resources, and we'd love to hear from you now on that message.
Well, thank you, Derek, and thanks to everybody out there. As we all know, again, these are difficult times. They continue. We have developed here in Utah the most comprehensive plan to overcome the healthcare crisis with the pandemic, and also to lead us to stabilization and recovery for the economy. And they go hand in hand, and we appreciate all those who are out there working tirelessly to help us accomplish both sides of the equation, the health of the people of Utah, as well as economic opportunity and recovery. So let me just talk about that. We have three phases in our plan. One's the urgency plan, the other is stabilization, then recovery. That's the three phases of our plan. We're still in the urgency phase, but with what we have made available to us, thanks to Senator Romney and others in Congress, we have the ability to help our businesses stabilize. And that's going to be a major blessing to us when it comes to economic recovery. If we stabilize the downfall that many businesses are experiencing and the layoffs, the increased unemployment, this is going to be a godsend, I think, to the businesses. And when I explain what is available there, I think everybody's going to say, yes, this sounds really good and very promising. As you know, on March 27th, Congress did pass what's called the CARES Act, $2.2 trillion recovery package to help us get through this difficult time. And again, addressing not only the healthcare needs and local healthcare needs of the individuals and people, but also the economic needs. They put $350 billion to help small business, and expanded what's called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which will allow small businesses, which are defined as less than 500 people. And by the way, as Derek knows as well as anybody, that encompasses about 90% of all the businesses in Utah are small businesses less than 500 people. And they can have loans now under this program up to $2 million for working capital. So when I said earlier, a few weeks ago, help was on the way, this is one very definite aspect where help is on the way and has arrived. By the way, businesses who want to apply directly to the Small Business Administration will be given immediately $10,000, even if you don't get approved for the loan. This is emergency money to help you with debts you've got, business you need to rent, pay, or mortgages, et cetera, for your business. So applying directly to the Small Business Administration, you receive an immediate $10,000 payment, even if they don't give you the loan. The CARES Act is really going to benefit most all of Utah businesses and individuals too, with loan and grant programs, significant corporate tax adjustments, direct payments, and increased unemployment insurance opportunities. For those who would like to get a little more detail on this, let me suggest that you go to coronavirus.utah.gov/business. Again, that's coronavirus.utah.gov/business for details on all these programs we're talking about. And that gives me the last one here, and that is the most important program right now for the people of Utah and small business arena is to be aware of what's called the Paycheck Protection Program, 3 Ps. The Paycheck Protection Program will cover payroll, rent, mortgage interest, utility payments for an 8-week period of time for just about every business with less than 500 employees in Utah. And as long as businesses keep their employees on the payroll and use the loan for operating expenses, the PPP loan will be forgiven. That's as close to free money as I've ever seen in my life. So help is on the way, and helping our businesses really bridge the gap that we're in right now and navigate these troubled waters to shores of safety with this money that will help them build that bridge. So I'll just say this in conclusion. If you are a growing Utah company with less than 500 employees, this program is for you. If you run a small mom and pop shop, this program's for you. If you contract or freelance work in any industry, this program is for you. If you're a local franchisee of a restaurant or a hotel, this program is for you. So get a hold of your lender, your financial institution, and have them start processing your paperwork. They started last Friday for small businesses and charities, but for sole proprietorships, one person, and independent contractors, starting this Friday, you can apply with your local lending institution. So again, I think this is a great opportunity. If you don't have a lender, if you need somebody to help direct you, if you don't have a primary bank, then again, go to coronavirus.utah.gov/business for a list of lenders that are helping to process these PPP loans. Now, I do have one other thing I'd just like to, means that we've got the great Senator Mitt Romney on the phone here. Let me just mention something that maybe he can think about and respond to as is appropriate. I just got off the phone with one of our medical manufacturing companies here in Utah. The concern they expressed is they're bigger than 500 employees, but they're not, ultra big. They're just find themselves kind of in the middle where there's not really a lot of help for them. and yet they're having the same problem. He has his revenue stream is going to be cut by 20 to 25%. A lot of the medical products that he supplies are being used in elective surgery, which is being now discontinued as we try to anticipate the COVID-19 virus and the impact on hospitals. So his revenue stream is going to be down 20 to 25%, he believes, this year, directly because of COVID-19, and there's not anything there for him. Here's a suggestion we came up with, Senator Romney. They've made it so that people that owe him money don't have to pay him any money for 6 months. He's got due and payables in 30 days. And so a suggestion might be that would help a company like him, and there's probably other suggestions out there too, would be how about if the federal government gave him a loan against his receivables? So he has working capital to keep people employed and keep his business afloat and going. He has about 2,300 employees here in Utah. And that delay of his ability to collect cash, he doesn't have that kind of reserve on hand that some of the very large companies might have. And so he's thinking a way to help a company of my size is I've got these receivables. How about a low interest rate loan against the receivables so I can act as if I've got the money and continue my operations as we've done in the past? That would be a great help to a company of his size. So just something to think about. And thanks for letting me come on, Derek. It's great to be with everybody, and good luck. We're going to get through this together.
Thank you, Governor. And as you mentioned, we do have Senator Mitt Romney joining us. Senator, we're grateful to have you. We understand that you're out of quarantine. How does it feel to be a free man again?
Well, I guess it hasn't changed much because I'm still pretty isolated from almost anybody. I think, like most of us that are over 65, we're told to take special care because we're at higher risk. And as a result, Ann and I are staying away from even grandkids. So, but it's good to have the worry of getting coronavirus actually diminished. I'm going to begin by responding to the governor's question with regards to larger employers. Actually, we put aside $500 billion in the CARES Act for medium to large size businesses over $500 billion. And it's a program called the Main Street Lending Program. The Federal Reserve is trying to put together the rules and the process for that. They've hired 3 different investment banks to handle each aspect of it. And these investment banks, and by the way, law firms as well, are laying out what the process will be. But quite simply, middle and large size businesses are able to go to their lending institution and get a loan, which will be backed up by the Federal Reserve. So there's not a risk to the bank. There will be, however, a market rate of interest, and this does have to be repaid. Now it's going to be stretched out in terms of payment terms, and the interest rate is low, but unlike what's being done for businesses under 500 employees, this has to be repaid. Let me now turn, however, to the program that most of you on this call are concerned about, and that's what to do with regards to smaller businesses. And I'm going to underline a couple things the governor said and bring you an update as to where things stand right now with regards to getting the cash. First of all, he indicated that there is an economic injury disaster program. That loan program, EIDL it's called, that loan program is available to businesses 500 employees and less. You need to show that you've been damaged by virtue of the COVID-19 crisis. You can get a loan under this program at 3.75%. And that loan is going to have to be repaid. As the governor indicated, the loan amount is up to $2 million, but it's a loan through the SBA. In order to get one of these loans, you have to apply directly to the SBA on their website. As the governor indicated, they give you $10,000 up front, which will be forgiven. $10,000, that amount will be forgiven, even if you don't end up qualifying for the overall program. So if you've been damaged, this is something that you ought to take advantage of. The second area, the second loan program is, as the governor indicated, the Paycheck Protection Program. And some $350 billion was allocated by Congress to go to this program. And this is the program where, in fact, the loans given will be forgiven. They'll be forgiven only if you maintain your payroll and if you use the money for paying people, paying rent, paying interest in your mortgage, paying utilities. Those are the appropriate expenses for which there will be a forgiveness of the loan. The amount of the loan is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. So as you go to apply for the loan, you need to show people what your average monthly payroll has been prior to any layoffs that may have occurred by virtue of COVID-19. If you've laid off a bunch of people, you may have to rehire some folks in order to qualify for the forgiveness under the terms of this loan. Now, in this case, you don't go directly to the SBA, you go directly to your own lending institution where you have the best relationship with the best bank that you know. Hopefully there'll be an SBA approved bank. We have about 800 of them across the country, but if your bank is not an SBA approved lender, why then you can go to another one that is. And Wells Fargo, Zions, many others are SBA institutions, and you can go to them and get this loan. So far across the country, in just the few days this program has been available, there have been 178,000 businesses that have applied for these and had them accepted, which represents some $50 billion of funds that are going to be going out. Now that's all the good news. The bad news is no one's seen the cash yet, or very few have actually seen the cash. Some banks are probably providing the cash, but most are holding back on actually putting these loans out for the very simple reason that the SBA has not sent them a promissory note indicating that the SBA will actually be buying these loans, and the banks don't want to be making these loans one after the other and not having someone taking them out. So they're waiting for the SBA to get that promissory note out, and it's kind of slow doing so. The second problem is the FBA's website has crashed, and the technology the banks typically go to be able to navigate exactly how these loans will be provided, they're not able to go to that website and get information they need. Amazon has said they'll build a new system for them, but y'all know how long it takes to build new systems. So it's kind of a mess there. The good news is that the Federal Reserve has stepped up and said, hey, look, we'll buy these loans from the banks. If you make these loans, we'll buy them from you. Don't have to worry about them getting stuck on your own balance sheet. But what this all sounds like is that the government really hasn't got its act together with regards to getting this money out. And that's to a great degree true. You got to give them a bit of a break, however, because this is something unlike anything the SBA has ever done before. This is so much larger than anyone ever anticipated that they're having a hard time keeping up. I know we often complain in conservative circles about the deep state. Well, in this case, the state wasn't deep enough. We need a lot more people to be able to make this process work more smoothly. But as the governor indicated, these two programs are available. The economic injury disaster loan, which you do have to pay back, and the other one, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, which you don't have to pay back if you use the funding for authorized purposes. I'd apply for both of them as early as you can, get approved as early as you can, and be in line. We're probably going to run out of money for the PPP program. We allocated $350 billion. There's huge demand across the country. Mitch McConnell indicated that it's likely that we will be adding another $200 billion to that with a vote this week, which is supposed to be done by unanimous consent. That means all 100 senators have to agree for that to happen. But I think I express a great deal of confidence that that'll get done. Now, on a different topic, you may have laid people off, and you may decide you don't want to be part of either one of those programs. And if you've laid people off, they're able to get unemployment insurance. Now, Congress, as part of the CARES Act, said in addition to the normal amount of unemployment insurance, which is provided in Utah, which is roughly $350 a week, Congress has added another $600 a week on top of that. So people who go on unemployment insurance will, for the next 4 months, get a check of roughly $950 a week. Now, you're doing some calculations there, and you realize you got some employees that don't make that much money when they're working. So we get a problem. In many cases, vitally important workers are going to look and say, hey, I'm going to leave this job and go get unemployment insurance because it's $950 a week. And we argued with our Democrat friends what they insisted on by making that $600 number was going to create all sorts of problems. And we tried to change it, but couldn't get it done. We just couldn't get the Democrats to agree. So there's a bit of a problem in your future as these numbers get out there, as people see $950 a week for unemployment insurance. They're going to be tempted to get their hands on some of that money. So, what are we telling people? We're saying, well, you may want to give people a particular bonus of some kind to keep them on the payroll. If, for instance, they're working in a grocery store, they're working as a custodian in a healthcare setting, and they're not earning that kind of money, you may need to pay them extra money to keep them there. People say, well, gosh, how are we going to afford that? Well, you may have to raise your prices somewhat to be able to meet the additional cost, or find some other way if you get deep pockets or through these loan programs to be able to help people in that to keep them on the payroll. So I apologize for that not being ideal. Finally, I can tell you that I anticipate there will be another relief plan in addition to the CARES Act, which, as the governor indicated, was about $2.2 billion. It's going to be another couple $100 billion, I believe, for small business on the PPP program. But there will also be, I think, additional efforts to help small business. That has not been nailed down yet. And it's going to be a thorny process because the Democrats are going to want to change the way the business environment in our country works, and Republicans are going to want to hold down spending, and there are going to be all sorts of different points of view. Can we get a new program out within the next month or two? I hope so. But I would certainly take advantage of the programs that have been passed as soon as you possibly can. And let me just say finally, I salute the pioneer spirit that exists in Utah. None of us was an actual pioneer, but the spirit lingers on. I saw that when I had the chance to help organize the Olympic Games. And I appreciate the volunteerism, the good heart of the people of Utah. And I'm confident that if we work hard enough, we'll be able to hold our businesses together and make sure that, that the Utah emerges as the shining example for the entire nation of how to do a good job maintaining a strong economy. Thanks, Derek. Back to you.
Thank you, Senator Romney. Thank you not just for the description of those programs, but also for the very integral and important role you played in putting those programs together through the CARES Act. I stayed close with your staff, and I know the very personal role that you were playing in that, working with Senator McConnell, all your colleagues across the aisle, as well as with the president on that. I want to make one point, and then I've got a couple questions for you that have come through from our audience today. The point I want to make is you talked about going to a trusted lender, which I think is so important. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that you can find a list of the lenders who are participating in both the PPP loan program as well as the emergency disaster loan program. You can find that at the coronavirus.utah.gov website. And then, Senator, a couple questions came through. First, I think it'd be important for those participating today to understand a little bit more about why it is so important that the Fed has come and said that they would buy those loans, and why that is an important element of keeping that flow of capital going.
Well, as you can understand, even though none of us, well, at least I'm not a banker, you can understand that if a bank is told, hey, we're gonna stand behind these loans you're putting out, and then we're gonna forgive them. The bank says, oh, that's well and good, but I'm the one putting out the money. And as I put those dollars out and I get a loan instrument back, my book of business is going to have a lot of loans. I've been put a lot of money out. Who's going to replenish that money? And is someone going to come in and buy those loans, if you will, and therefore put some more cash on my balance sheet so that I can keep operating as a bank? And the banks have been a little nervous about that. I saw that Wells Fargo said, look, we've already promised now $10 billion, but that's kind of all we can do because we're not going to keep on adding more and more of these loans to our book of business. And other banks have taken different amounts, but are still concerned. And I think because the SBA is having such a hard time getting out the commitments that they needed to get out to give confidence to the banks, the Federal Reserve today said, we're going to buy these loans. So don't you guys worry. We'll buy them from you. And so you'll get the cash that you need to maintain the strength of your balance sheet. So it's clearly a commitment which is important to the banks and will allow them to be forthcoming in providing funds. But again, I go back to the fact that everybody wanted to get money out as quickly as we possibly could, but getting out $2.2 trillion, as you know, Washington is good at taking money in. It's not real experienced at giving money back. And so it's having a hard time getting the money out. And hopefully we'll be able to get a better job over the coming week or two.
Thank you, Senator, for that explanation. And the reason why I wanted you to give that detail is because we may have a lot of businesses. In fact, I know that we do have some businesses in Utah that have gone to their lenders and they've already been told, we have too much on our balance sheet right now. We can't make any more loans. And so that's having the Fed step in is going to help to clear out the ditch, so to speak, so that can continue to flow. The other question that's come in is something that you know a lot about, which is venture capital and some businesses that are backed by either private equity or venture capital, I understand were not eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. Is that something else that you think the Congress is going to look at, or how does that fit into an ability to help those businesses?
And that was actually not part of the CARES Act. That wasn't something that was in the legislation that we just passed. You see, over the years, the SBA has put in place a series of regulations about who could get an SBA loan. And they said, wait a second, we're not going to give SBA loans to companies that are backed by venture capital or backed by private equity firms, because those firms ought to be providing the capital, as well as standard loans coming from lending institutions. And so the SBA has rules about affiliation to say, gosh, the venture capital firm or a private equity firm has many, many different businesses. And because of, we're considering them all affiliates of one another, and that's how we keep those firms from getting SBA loans. Okay, that kind of worked in a setting where normal SBA business is going on. Now we're in a setting where we're trying to rescue businesses and keep employees on the payroll. And so it's not ideal at this stage, because we would rather have people stay on the payroll getting paid by their employer rather than going to the unemployment insurance line, because either way, government has to pay. We'd rather have them stay employed and connected with an employer. But because of these old rules that have existed over a long period of time, which really bar any firm that has a substantial investment from a private equity firm or a venture capital firm cannot have access to these loans, either the emergency loan or the PPP loan. And some in Congress are saying that's got to change. But I can assure you it will be demagogue, and people will say, oh, we're giving money to bail out venture capitalists, and we're giving money to bail out private equity firms. I think the political barrier is substantial enough that it's going to be hard for that to change. While it makes sense, it doesn't look good to see that somehow a business that's a venture capital backed business is going to be getting money from the federal government. And the answer, the public will say, why did the venture capital company take care of their own people? Well, so if you were to ask me to predict, I'd say it's not likely you're going to see a change in that, and that those firms are going to have to find ways to, in some cases, reduce their payroll to stay alive, and that means putting people on unemployment insurance, which is not what we'd like to have happen.
What about with agricultural businesses? That seems like something we all can get behind. We all love our farmers and our ranchers and our dairymen. Under traditional SBA guidelines, an agricultural business would not be eligible for an SBA loan. I know many of the SBA restrictions were lifted or modified under the CARES Act. Do you know if agricultural businesses are eligible for these PPP loans?
Agriculture has a special provision, and if you go on the state website, I'm sure you'll find it. If not, if you go to romney.senate.gov, we have links that take you to all the government programs. And there's a special program for ranchers and farmers, for those that are in the ag business, because there are not only access to these programs, but access to other programs as well that are designed to help in the agriculture community. And by the way, just to underscore something the governor said, unrelated, but he mentioned it, I want to mention it again, which is sole proprietorships, independent contractors cannot apply for these PPP loans today, but they will be able to apply coming Friday. Again, they're just trying to get the system up, but these programs are designed for all small business.
You've been very generous with your time. I'm going to ask you one more question. You've talked a little bit already about phase 4, about some supplemental funding for the CARES Act, specifically for the PPP loans. Is there anything else that you anticipate? What conversations are happening in the halls of Congress with regards to the possible phase 4?
Well, I think they're going to want to see what happened to the larger program, the Main Street lending program, for instance, and how well that's worked out and how many additional dollars may be needed there. There will surely be funding that needs to be added to the unemployment insurance rolls, because those will probably also be reduced significantly just by the number of people that are signing up. 10 million people signed up last week, which is obviously a historic number. And then I think there's going to be a good deal of discussion about whether the check that was sent or will be sent to every adult individual in the country the $1,200 check, whether that program will be repeated again. And I think there will be some who think it's a good idea to repeat it again. There'll be others that say, no, it's just a one-time check. And I think that's probably the area where there'll be the most controversy. There'll also be a discussion about more money going to states. And there's a feeling that cities and towns in particular are not getting the support that they may need. Some in our state in particular are seeing tourism go down. I'm thinking about those towns and cities around our national parks. Tourism is going down. Revenues for the cities are going down. Under the current program, the state cannot provide money to a city or a town because its revenues go down. They can only provide money to meet COVID-19 related expenses. So those are going to be some of the areas that'll be in controversy in Washington. I think that the Democrats are going to push for more money going to the states and more money getting sent out to cities and towns. And I think you'll also see another push to get more money to hospitals. Because as you pointed out, Governor, the hospitals are seeing a dramatic drop off in their revenue because they've made room for COVID-19 patients and they make their money on hip replacements and other elective surgeries, and those things are being delayed.
Thank you again, Senator Romney. Thanks for coming on with us, and thanks for your time and your leadership. We're going to move now to Chris Cox, who is the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. Chris is leading a team specifically related to the efforts of the Economic Response Task Force. I'll let her describe her work to you. Chris, are you with us?
Yep, I'm here.
We can hear you, so go right ahead.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. It was fascinating hearing from Senator Romney on those issues. And of course, I love the governor. So Derek has charged a group of us under the leadership of the governor to get tactical on this urgent phase of the plan. So I want to walk you through kind of high level what we're doing, what our goal is. And the urgent phases you can really almost divide into two buckets: an effort to mitigate the impact of the virus and get past it faster, and the other piece is to prepare for it, right? So if the surge happens and all of our mitigation efforts just don't work, do we have enough capacity, ventilators, overflow for hospitals? I'm going to spend my time today now talking about the mitigation effort. And it's a challenge. So Derek always says this, and I probably quote him once a day now: what we're talking about is a goal, not a guarantee. But the more time I'm working on this with just amazing people across the state, the more confident I am that we will have a positive impact. So let's just talk about the goal of this. The challenge has been, and the governor spoke to it earlier, we're trying to walk this balance between public health and the economy. And you can kind of get stuck and vacillate back and forth. So we had to start with just, look, what's an objective way we can know if we're doing okay with virus containment, that the spread has slowed, that we can contain, that we can get ahead of it. We feel comfortable enough about how things are working so we can start bringing the economy back online. Because sometimes the biggest challenge we see in organizations are kind of this vague, ambiguous goals. What does it mean to be successful with any of our efforts? So the first place we started was with that, and working with public health officials. Really, if we can get this virus into what we call linear growth, I'll talk about what that means, and flat growth, we'd be really happy. So right now, if I have it, I could be passing, if I positive, I could be passing it along to 2.5 other people, and then they pass it on, and that's how you get this exponential nature of the growth curve. Well, if we could get it to, I have it, and I only pass it along to one more person, and then eventually less than one person, that's pretty good. I can get to linear growth. 1,000 people come in who are tested positive, but I can identify 1,000 people, and I've got it under containment. So we got an objective measure. I'll talk about in a second how we actually do that measurement. But that was the first thing, and then we wanted to reverse design and think about what would it take to hit containment. It's called R0, but we'll call it our transmission rate, to get it to go linear, to slow down. What if we wanted to do that in 6 weeks, 8 weeks? What would that look like? What would we have to do? How quickly would we have to ramp up? And the challenge is, of course, what is the problem that we're trying to actually solve as we try to achieve this goal? And there's so many issues to track and tackle, but we needed to get really focused and get really clear because we don't have a lot of time. Our mindset is that management time and attention is always the biggest constraint, and especially now. If we chase symptoms rather than real core leverage points, we're just going to miss the opportunity to get ahead of this thing. The problem as we define it, you can see this iceberg, I call it the iceberg principle, is think if you're out on the ocean, you see a big iceberg, about 10% of it's above water, most of it's underwater. And what wrecks ships is what's underwater, what you can't see. Our challenge is that we're fighting an enemy that's invisible to us, not only because of its size, but because for about every one person who's infected, there are another 4 out there who are carrying tested positive, but they don't know it, and they're not known to the system. And so they go on and they infect somebody else, and then they infect, and it goes on and on and on. So what we're trying to do is detect the undetected to make the invisible visible. And that's a challenge. So today, let's say we have 1,000 people known to the system. There's another 4,000 out there who likely are carrying, but we don't know where they are or who they are. And we're trying to find them in a state of over 3 million people. So it's really like looking for needles in a haystack. Hence, in our efforts, we're erring on the side of going bigger than small because every model in the world is just, every model, every forecast we know is wrong. The question is how wrong. So when we look at different models and different, we have a group of really smart data people working with us. There are variations in some of the models. We're going to err on the side of being conservative and building to worst case scenario to make sure we're ready for it. So that's the problem. Simple, but not easy to solve. You can look at our next slide, the strategy. Strategy is pretty straightforward, but I'll walk you through the details. Essentially, we got to detect the undetected. We have to put a machine or a process in place where we can find people who test positive faster than the virus itself can spread. And then second, we need to move them quickly into pretty rigorous quarantine. I loved hearing this Senator Romney talk about that he is quarantining and leading by example, and appreciate that. So we need to make sure we've got really solid SOPs and ways to monitor folks who are in quarantine so that we continue to contain. But again, how do we know if we're doing this, if any of this is working, if we're making a difference? I'll spend a couple minutes talking about our measures, and then I'll give you a few more details about our big leverage points. I'm calling these the core 4. Data is awesome, but it can also be a big distraction. There's so much data out there right now that almost can create noise in our systems. And what we're looking for is signal, not noise. So of all the things we're watching, and there's other operational measures, at the high level, I call these the core 4. Let me walk you through these. They're really important. We now have, we were able to stand up in a very short period of time. It was crazy, but everyone was so great, hospitals, et cetera, to have a statewide dashboard where we're getting real-time information. We're not relying on predictions or forecasts or models. We can now start using real information, which is incredibly helpful. And we just started pushing out this week our first report to stakeholders. And then next week or this Friday, we'll include targets around these core 4 for all of our stakeholders. So let me go through these our major core 4 measures. The first one is, I'm blind, you guys, so I'm not looking at the slide. So if they're out of order, I apologize. First one, we're looking at new daily admissions to a hospital. And that's the way we're measuring transmission rates. It's a really clean number. Think if we start testing more people, we're going to start finding the people who are likely already positive, those undetected, those people under the waterline. We're going to start finding those. So the daily count numbers may look bigger, but it actually could be that we're just getting better with testing and identifying people. So the number that is more pure, it's not impacted by our tracing or testing efforts, is daily new hospitalizations. We now have that number. I want to wait for a few more days, Thursday, to give us a few more days of trend so we can see where we are with the growth of this. So that's usually looking at the transmission rate. The second one we're, of course, looking at is overall hospital capacity. just phase one, and then of course ICU capacity and surge capacity. And the other two are pretty operational and really important. And I think there's confusion, quite frankly, across our country on this. This next one, we call it about the effectiveness of our testing and tracing efforts. So testing capacity is great, but I'm just not testing for the sake of testing. I'm testing to find these people who are likely positive. So what I want to really do is, if I think there's 4,000 people out there, am I finding 20 of them, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000? How good am I setting up ways to find people who are possibly at risk, even communities where they're hotspots, and moving those folks into testing? So testing, like, well, you'll see numbers, testing per capita, things like that. Again, they're interesting. I look at those. But what's more important is how good are we finding the people under the waterline? So that's an effectiveness of our testing and tracing efforts. We'll be looking at that in two different ways. I won't spend on time of that now, but that's a big focus. And then the last one is around points of origin. Let's say I can look at my data and 20% of people are infected because of travel, people coming in and out of the state. Or what if I could see 80% of our new cases are coming from person-to-person transmission? That may tell us, our social distancing people need to comply more. That information now exists, but it's state level, and it's so high up, we can't get into the community level yet. But that's part of the stuff I'll talk about here in a minute, and how we'll start getting more granular at that. So if we see an X%, I've seen a little spike actually in healthcare. We measure that separately. Most of our infections are not coming from healthcare, but it went from like 3 to 4%. Not a big deal, but that's something we would watch so we can go and be very surgical in how we deal with those issues. Their overall strategy is, when we start getting really good at these measures and the changes we're making, we can treat the patient rather than chemotherapy with surgically removing the tumor, much more precision. And that's how we can get the economy back. So I'll go over to the next slide. You can see there's picture of the dashboard up and running. But the next slide is kind of our overall, just our operating map. We're interested not in how all the parts work separately, but more about how the parts work together. What's the flow of work look like? Is it a person comes in and moves through the system? And this is very high level. There's a lot more SOPs and everything behind this, but there's a few leverage points I want to point out that are new and important for our work. Up front, we are building what's called an intelligence portal that will be pulling and pushing out really critical information in ways that we have not had access to before. So let me just talk about 4 of those, and then I'll wrap this up. The traditional way of how we do this with infectious disease is they take a test, the lab lets them know if you're tested positive or not. The local health department, if you're positive, makes contact, and they do contact tracing. They go out and they interview people like an investigator. Where were you 3 days ago? Who did you come in contact with? Amazing, smart people who are working really hard. We went to them a few weeks ago and just surveyed and tried to figure out what they needed, because they're going to be on the front line doing some really hard work. And they said they're going to need at least 1,000 more people just to help manage their cases. So the state has stepped up to deploy, and people just volunteered, and we're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes with cost allocation, et cetera. But 1,200 people from state government who are now deployed to a contact call center overflow for our local health departments. So those folks can just, not get behind, because speed is everything right now. The second piece is the survey that went out last week, and we really encourage people to take it. It's a self-assessment, and it aligns with the risk protocols that we're using. The experts at the Department of Health with other folks that we've contracted out with have helped to design and finalize these risk factors and testing protocols. So you can self-assess, and if you're at risk, it will let you know, and you can actually schedule to go get tested. And and they'll find out if their scheduling doesn't work for you, you can actually see a list of places to go get tested. We're really trying to ramp up the number of tests we have available. A few weeks ago, we were like 500, then it went to 1,000, 2,000. Our goal is 7,000. Last week, we did a launch both with the private sector to enhance our testing, and we'll have a few more sites on this week and then more next. So our goal is 7,000 tests a day, and IHC and ARUP have been fantastic getting an amazing foundation in place. And we're lucky because I think we're ahead of a lot of states in that space because, one, we have great partners, and we've been trying to look ahead and figuring this out maybe before testing became popular. So we have an edge on that. We're going to hit our goal of 7,000 tests a day. To be honest, I wish we could do 10, 20,000 tests a day. As testing becomes cheaper and more prevalent, there's different kind of tests coming online, antibody testing, et cetera. Some of those test protocols, as we think about going back to work, we'll consider how and when those can be used as, working with professionals in the field, the experts. So the two other really quick pieces, we are deploying a mobile app that will be coming out hopefully the end of this week if all goes well, if not early next week. It's really an important tool and will give us critical information to help both citizens make good decisions for their lives and their own health, as well as for the state. All the information will be owned by the subscriber, by the individual, and we're adopting these standards EU adopted to give people confidence that their data is secure. And actually every 30 days, all the data will be deleted, even if the owner doesn't, for all privacy standards. That I'll provide more information to Derek to share with this group when we go out. But key to making this mobile app work is engagement. We talked about point of origin. Some of this data will help us understand where hotspots emerging, new transmission networks in a community. Am I seeing infections starting from a certain neighborhood, a grocery store? Because right now the data at the state level is just so high, it's difficult to become scapular. So this gives us a little bit more micro data to see the stuff that we need to see. And then finally, we'll be launching a large scale testing, working with some experts at the University of Utah. We'll be, I think, one of the first states in the country out on this, because there's a lot of speculation about how many people are infected, what's the immunity, all this stuff. We need that fast. And so we are going aggressively with the University of Utah and some experts at the University of Chicago, and that will give us even more information. All of this information will be part of an intelligence portal so we can make really quick, fast decisions. Where do we need to scale? What's working, what's not working? We feel like we're building an airplane while we're flying. So we're in the build mode, and we have never worked this fast in government, which is a testament to how great the people are right now, but also how government can be overly bureaucratic and unnecessary. And I think it exposes some of the places things can be improved, which is great by me. But we want to move it, so it won't be perfect. We're going fast. We're getting stuff up. It's like we're putting the parts of the car together and just getting the car on the road so we can actually drive it. And then we'll have a couple weeks and ongoing improvement. We'll have to tweak it, improve the flow, and make improvements as we go forward. So essentially, at the end of the day, our goal is to have everything up by Friday. There's a list there of all the stuff going on, just to give you an idea. Most of those things are either done or almost done. So we have a date to have all the parts in the machine in place so we can drive the car by Friday. And then we'll go from there. So in parallel to all of this, under Derek's economic task force is starting to plan and think about the stabilization phase. It takes time to ramp up. It takes time to think about, look, until there's an antiviral out there, we're going to have to learn to live and work with the virus among us. So what does that look like? What are the health protocols? What do health investigators do? Do we wear masks? When do we use antibody testing? What other support do we need to think about as a state to fill in any gaps that the federal government can't fill in? So there's a lot of that starting now, knowing that it will take some time to ramp so we can hit the ground running. We are keenly aware of the impact this is having to individuals. We all probably have somebody in our family, if not ourselves, who has been impacted by this in a significant way. So we have to get the public health machine working and having confidence in that so we can get back to work and back to normal life as much as we can and as quickly as we can. So Derek, that's kind of, we're trying to essentially wrap it up. We're trying to build a machine so we can find people who are at risk, assess, get them tested and quarantine, and quick, fast, and to scale.
Thank you, Chris. You were so thorough. I only had one question, but you actually answered it right at the end. And that was,
there we
is
go.
it too soon to start thinking about and preparing for opening segments of our economy up again? And I heard you say, no, it's not too soon. In fact, we need to start thinking about that now and how we're going to do it.
It takes time. Let's just say we feel like people should have masks or, have enough masks if people want to use them. The supply chain of getting the stuff, it's like a bidding war out there on some of this equipment. Do we need to start tapping local manufacturers who can produce that stuff? What about if we want to do antibody testing in different segments? When do we start purchasing that? So I jumped into this, maybe what has it been, Derek, a month ago, right? As we put this plan together, and we've been working 24/7, and it just takes time to ramp and plan and think through. We need to be safe. We'll have the measures in place to watch with trigger points and ranges. If we have let's say the virus is at a linear growth rate in one county, by the way, all the data now we can break out by county. If in one county, all of a sudden we go from linear growth to exponential, the hope is we could catch it fast, get in there and understand the root cause, quarantine where we need to, isolate while also keeping the rest of the state going. So this is the conflict. How do we keep the public safety, public health front and center while getting the economy back online? And I think we can do both. It just takes asking the right questions and believing that we can find the answers.
With your help and support of the governor, I'm sure we will strike the right balance. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for your leadership, Derek.
Thank you. I want to turn the rest of our time to my colleague at the Davis County Chamber, Angie Osguthorpe. And Angie, hear what you're doing to support your business community in Davis County and also to introduce your guest today. Go ahead.
Thank you, Derek. I'm so grateful to be on this with you all. I'm just amazed at the collaboration that's been happening through the state and our U.S. legislators and all the chambers of commerce and many, many other organizations that are helping our companies. I did want to give a good news story. I had a great member of the chamber call me this morning. She was really excited and she called to say thank you. She had, we'd gotten her some information and she called her lending institution and she'd gone through the process and she had been told that she was approved and she was calling me to tell me that she actually has the funds in her account right now. So she was really excited. You can imagine she was overwhelmingly grateful for the funds that are probably going to help her save her businesses. She's got several large restaurants in the area. So, I know it's frustrating for a lot of people, but there is some good news and it is happening, so that's one good thing. I also just wanted to say, we have our healthcare workers on the front line and of course our retail grocery store workers, but we also have our financial institution people who are working nonstop overtime trying to get these funds out. It's a monumental job, of course, and I just wanted to shout out to them. We know that it's frustrating. We know that you're working overtime, and we're so grateful. So, along with that, I have wanted to introduce Troy, who's the CEO of LakeView Hospital. I wanted not only for an update of our healthcare workers on the front line personally, but also I want to give him a second to talk about business case. A hospital also is a business, and I know that they are down in the other procedures and things like that. So I wanted to give Troy a few minutes just to tell us about how it's happening with the healthcare workers and also just as a business. So Troy is the CEO of LakeView Hospital. He is on our executive board, and he's also the vice chair of our legislative affairs group. So he's a wonderful chamber member. Troy, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Angie. Very exciting to hear Kristen's update. I have to tell you that gives a lot of hope to us who are wondering how we're going to get a handle on this, and that sounds like a very great plan. But just like she mentioned, hospitals are in the same boat of building an airplane while they're in flight. Every hospital in America right now is either fighting this virus or preparing to fight it. And while we prepared for this type of a pandemic for years, we've had tabletops over and over. The actual execution of these plans, it's a Herculean effort. And I've been in the hospital business for 25 years, and I can tell you this is the most challenging crisis we've faced as we prepare to fight this unknown enemy. So yes, hospitals are looking to double, even triple our capacity. We're finding different care areas, being creative, gathering more beds, gathering more ventilators. But I have to tell you, that's not the hardest part. It's finding staff both available and brave enough to engage in this battle. So I'm very proud of my staff for their courage, their fortitude, as they too prepare. And more on that in just a second when it comes to innovative, which is what you asked us to talk about a little bit today. Angie also wanted me to talk about the business side, but I want to tell you about some innovative things too. So when it comes to a hospital, a hospital's bottom line, yes, is funded in large part by the elective surgeries, and we stopped doing those several weeks ago. We plan to continue to do that for a while here. And so if you walked into a hospital today, it's going to be very quiet, and has been for the last 3 weeks, and it probably will be for the next 3 weeks if the spike truly is about April 25th. But then, of course, you're going to have a surge, and then so all of those staff are going to be needed. What's going to be happening then? But at the same time, while the business is low, you don't get to turn your lights off. You don't get to change a lot of your practices. So a lot of the things that we're doing are just very expensive, but there's no income to take care of that. What I'm worried about more, putting on Senator Romney's radar, and I appreciate him speaking to this a little bit. We had 47 hospitals close last year in America, 135 over the past 5 years. And so these smaller hospitals that don't belong to chains that have the ability to absorb some of this is going to be really tricky. But I'll be honest, one of my greatest fears isn't just the hospitals, but it is those who supply the hospitals with physicians and DME and home health. And so our whole healthcare system, that economy is going to be really struggling. So I'm grateful also to hear about the $200 billion perhaps going to go into those loans, because they are scrambling right now. They've already applied and they've already been told, oh, you're in line, or I can't even get you in line, go to another lender. So really good news to hear that there's going to be some more dollars open up when it comes to that. So when it comes to innovation, like I said, when this virus peaks in Utah, we're going to need every one of our doctors and nurses and our techs and CNAs who right now they're losing hours. They're being told to stay home due to low volume. So I'm very proud of my parent company, HCA. All of the 185 HCA hospitals around the nation, including the 8 MountainStar hospitals here in Utah, have been given the following benefits to keep our staff whole over the next 60 days. So these employees who are losing hours now, while we close elective surgeries to prepare for COVID-19, they're going to receive a continuation. And that means that they'll first be redeployed to other areas that are still needing them. But if we can't find a place for them, then they're asked to stay home. They're going to get 70% of their pay without having to dip into their PTO. Employees who are actually quarantined, no matter where they become exposed, if they become exposed with the virus, they'll be given 100% pay during that quarantine time. We're offering scrub laundering so that they don't have to take their dirty scrubs home. Perhaps something got on them. We're also providing housing at 4 major hotel chains around the nation for caregivers who they don't want to go home after their shift for caring for a COVID-19 patient. This ensures that their family's not exposed. There's free online telemedicine visits for every employee and their families. There's 24/7 emotional support, counseling service, behavioral health, all free. HCA has what's called the Hope Fund, which provides grants to our colleagues with financial burden. So we might be taking care of our own employees, but what if their spouses loses their job? This is where the Hope Fund comes in. So our CEO, Sam Hazen, has donated 100% of his salary to the Hope Fund for the next 2 months. All of HCA's senior leadership is taking a 30% cut. And this includes my administrative team, who voluntarily is donating 20% of our salaries over the next 60 days to go into that Hope Fund, knowing that some of our employees are going to need those dollars. So at HCA, we care like family, and this means caring for our patients and our staff as though they were our closest loved ones. So what can you do? Just join us in supporting the frontliners at all the Utah hospitals. Post encouraging words. Find ways to build up these great heroes, because like on 9/11, these are the ones who are going to be rushing in as others rush out. Very proud of them.
That is phenomenal, Troy. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think heroes is the right word to use. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you, Angie, for introducing us to Troy and what he and his team are doing. Thanks to everyone for joining today's town hall. Don't forget, we'll be with you again on Thursday at 4 p.m. On Thursday's town hall, we'll be talking with the Senate President and the Speaker of the House on an upcoming special session and what we might expect from the state legislature and our other state leaders with regards to support for business. We'll see you then. Bye.